Order, order. Pete Wishart to move the motion.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr Walker, and it's a pleasure to serve under such a distinguished member of the Speaker's panel today for this short debate. And I'm grateful to see so many members of the Scottish Affairs Committee in their place and ready to go for this very, very important debate. I beg to move that this House has considered the sixth report of the Scottish Affairs Committee, the future of the oil and gas industry. Mr Walker, we decided to hold an inquiry into oil and gas because of the unprecedented uncertainty caused to the sector by the dramatic fall in oil prices at the end of the last decade. We were interested to assess how or indeed if the sector had recovered and to better understand some of the contemporary issues in the industry and how new innovations and interventions had played themselves out. Critically, we wanted to explore the readiness of the sector for transition and decarbonisation. We also wanted to look at its preparedness for diversification of the skills acquired over 40 years of production and development in the North Sea. We are, as always, grateful to the many people who gave us evidence and contributed to inquiry and the support that we received from the sector. We held 6 evidence sessions and we received over 30 written submissions to this report. We are particularly grateful to the Oil and Gas Technology Centre and my honourable colleagues, constituents of Aberdeen South, who hosted one of our evidence sessions and kindly gave us the premises to launch this report only a few short weeks ago. Can I first of all say that the sector is in a reasonably good place, and the resilience shown by our oil and gas industry in the face of such turbulence has obviously got to be commended. The tenacity that's been shown by the workforce and those involved in this industry is something I think that we all recognised and seen the recovery, the sustainable recovery that's been put in place in the course of the past few years. There remains a very strong and positive future for Scotland's oil and gas sector, and the opportunities of a just transition to a decarbonised future is there to be grabbed and taken. Scotland remains at the forefront of the global oil and gas industry, which contributed some £9.2 billion to the Scottish economy in 2017 and supports 135,000 jobs in Scotland. And only this week, you'll have seen, Mr Walker, the Oil and Gas Authority predicted that 11.9 billion barrels will be extracted by 2050, a hike of almost 50% from the forecast 4 years ago of 8 billion barrels. This shows an industry and a sector in a reasonably healthy condition. More than that, Scotland's oil and gas is essential to the UK's energy security. It's forecast that 2/3 of the UK's primary energy needs will be met by oil and gas till at least 2035. Of course, I'll give way to them.
Thank you for giving way. Just speaking there about the benefit for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, I have some constituents who depend upon the Scottish oil and gas industry and sector for their employment, and those skills that they have learnt, the skills they learnt aren't just specific for Scotland, but they're for everyone. Has the honourable gentleman able, through the report, to have acknowledged the fact that there are many, all regions of the United Kingdom benefit from the Scottish oil and gas sector, and therefore it's good for everyone?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. Of course, he's absolutely right. This is a UK-wide industry, an industry that has a footprint in most nations of the United Kingdom, and practically every region of England has at least some way upon the supply chain serving the oil and gas industry right across the UK. So he's absolutely right to remind us that this is a UK-wide industry, one that we should all be very, very proud of, whether you're in Northern Ireland or whether you're in rural Perthshire. But it wouldn't surprise you, Mr Walker, to say that we found in this inquiry that the sector is still facing some unprecedented challenges. Fluctuation in oil prices hit companies with extreme uncertainty, particularly those working in that supply chain which I just mentioned, while the rate of new well exploration has nosedived. At the same time, the industry needs to properly prepare for decline in production, which will inevitably happen, to ensure that the economic benefits and the highly skilled jobs the sector has acquired and brought to Scotland are not lost. It also has to find new ways to reduce its carbon footprint and use its skills and engineering knowledge to help develop low carbon and renewable technologies. No small task, I can hear you thinking, Mr Walker. These are the challenges, therefore, that's at the heart of this committee's report. What we therefore ask is how the government should therefore support this industry while it gets ready for production to decline. How do we meet the UK's energy needs, of which oil and gas will remain a major component while meeting our climate change obligations? We believe that the best way for the government to support the industry through these challenges is to agree an ambitious sector deal. A sector deal backed by combined investment of £176 million from both industry and government could deliver £110 billion for the whole UK economy, but with particular benefits for Scotland and the north east of Scotland. This funding would support 3 centres of excellence focused on transformational technology, underwater innovation and decommissioning. I know when the Secretary of State appeared before the committee in December, she said she wasn't able to go into any great detail about the deal, which we totally accepted, given that the government are still to design it properly and come forward with what will happen. But she said progress would be announced in weeks, not months. Well, it's not months, Mr Walker, since December, but it certainly is weeks. And I know that the Secretary of State couldn't join us today because of other pressing business, but we are fortunate to have the Minister responsible for deals, sector deals, with us today. So perhaps in his closing remarks he could update the committee in the progress and the shape of some of the sector deals. I'm of course certain that any delay, Mr Walker, will be down to the government taking very seriously the recommendations in this report and designing its deal around some of the very useful recommendations that we have made. That this sector deal is forward-thinking and sets up the industry to meet the challenges of climate change, of decommissioning and the industry's future beyond the UK continental shelf head-on. And rather than the usual just helping maximisation of production just for short-term thinking, the days of short-termism in the North Sea, I believe, are over. It is long-term planning and strategic thinking that's required. These are the priorities for the deal that our report outlines, and I'll explain just a few of some of these details just a little bit further. Firstly, it must capitalise on the opportunities arising from decommissioning. The North Sea is not only going to be the first major basin to go through large-scale decommissioning, it's also without doubt one of the most challenging environments anywhere in the world for decommissioning to take place. As one of the witnesses said to us in one of the evidence sessions, if you could decommission a rig in the North Sea, you could decommission a rig anywhere in the world. Scotland therefore has an unmissable opportunity to export its decommissioning knowledge to the rest of the world, and therefore we've called for the sector deal to be accompanied by a government decommissioning export strategy to anchor a global decommissioning industry in the northeast of Scotland. The sector deal also needs to deliver on reducing the cost of decommissioning. We were quite surprised that when we heard the range of the estimates of the cost of decommissioning. It was quite extraordinary, the gulf that was between the lowest point and the highest point. So we will need to see this reduced to the cost for UK taxpayers, because half of the cost of decommissioning will still be met through the Treasury and, of course, through the taxpayers themselves through tax relief. Secondly, the sector must find ways to transfer its unique expertise to other sectors of the economy so that these jobs are not lost when oil production stops. One of the most impressive features of this report, I think something that all the committee recognised when we were taking evidence, is just the range of skills that's available to us from North Sea exploration. The skills that have been acquired over the 4 decades of production, almost skills which are amongst the most impressive to be found anywhere when it comes to oil and gas sectors in the world. It is absolutely imperative that the skills, expertise, talent and energy that's been built up in this sector is not lost as we move towards decommissioning and the ending of production. And we heard, Mr Walker, that there's no end to the opportunities available if we get this right, with sectors including aerospace, data analytics, marine and offshore engineering, digital manufacturing, satellite technology and offshore wind are all there and open for skills and technology transfer. We were particularly taken by the opportunities in the renewable sector, and we call for the sector deal to contain specific and measurable proposals for how it will improve skill and technology transfer to the sector. Scotland gained by acquiring North Sea. We discovered it. And it's questionable whether we secured the benefits from discovering North Sea oil. We must not lose out in the benefits of what's going to happen next when it comes to renewable technology. And the skills acquired in the North Sea are perfectly fitted and could be adapted in use for renewable technology. And I'd be grateful. Yes, of course I could wait, Honourable Gentleman.
I'm very, very grateful. You're speaking very, very well about the work of the committee in this regard. I think we worked very, very well to produce this report. But in terms of the redeployment of skills, as the diminishing supply of oil continues, does he agree with me at paragraph 82 in the report, where we identified that fracking might be an opportunity where these skills might be redeployed? Indeed, Colette Cohen, the Chief Executive of Oil and Gas Technology Centre, said that fracking would provide, and I quote, increased opportunities for the workforce and for the technologies and skills we already have. So does he agree with me there's an opportunity here to continue to use these skills in fracking and connected industries?
I'm grateful. I had a sneaking suspicion, Mr Walker, I would secure an intervention based on the honourable member's desire to see fracking included in all this. And of course, as he knows, there was a robust debate within the committee membership about the value of fracking and what we should say about this in the report. He'll know personally I don't share the honourable gentleman's views, though I am aware of the evidence it was given, and it was given sincerely by some members of the sector. I think that the committee, through consensus, possibly agreed that this was something that we weren't really concerned with as we went forward, and we'd left it as that in the report. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Yesterday's statement from Phil Hammond was talking about banning gas from homes in 2025. Surely that's one of the benefits out of oil and gas that we've got to look for in the future. Is that not a worry for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was quite intrigued by the message from the Chancellor yesterday when this was mentioned. But yes, there are these huge opportunities that are there for us. And I think the honourable gentleman will agree with me that, you know, that when we saw the things that could come, like how these skills could be applied and transferred, that was mightily impressive. So perhaps the Minister can say what more work could be done to ensure that we get this, and we'll be grateful for any insight that he has in the conversation he's been having with the sector when it comes to skills transfer. But finally, Mr Walker, the sector deal must bring forward proposals for how the sector will address its carbon footprint, both in the process of producing and extracting oil and gas and by finding ways to reduce emissions from using oil and gas. I have to say the report received a mixed reaction from some environmental groups, and I'll put it as delicately as that, which did surprise me, given the range of recommendations we made and the care and diligence that we gave when it came to shaping up some of the transition recommendations that we made. We believe in a just transition, and we said as much in this report. And we believe that if that is achieved, that we will get there to a new future and a green and transformative future for the sector. Yes, of course, I give it to the gentleman.
I agree with my honourable friend, and this, the chairman of the committee is speaking very well on the report. Would you agree with me that on those criticisms that we received from, for example, Friends of the Earth, when they said there was no coverage of the impact on climate change, they clearly hadn't got as far as Chapter 6?
Well, absolutely. And I think when the report came out, I think all of us in the committee were quite surprised just by the scale of the response. And I don't think there was a true examination of what we had, because what we say is that there is transition required, but it has to come from a position of strength. We cannot just do anything which would compromise our ability to have a viable, sustainable sector which is in a position to do the just transition that I think environmental groups are looking for. Yes, of course. One last time.
Thank you very much, and you were very generous with the interventions. One of the things that I noticed in the report was the impact upon fisheries, and the Scottish Fishermen's Federation in particular referred to the retention of artificial rigs and so on in the seas that may disadvantage the local fishing community. What consideration did the report give to that, and the chairperson in particular? Thank you.
Well, I wasn't going to mention this, but it was a fascinating feature of the report, and I'm really grateful the honourable gentleman's drawn my attention to this, because we took a lot of time speaking to the environmental groups, and particularly some of the wildlife groups, just about sustainable fisheries. And there was this whole suggestion of rigs to reefs, which is what they call it, where there was a suggestion that you leave the infrastructure in place as a magnet and attraction for wildlife and fish species. We received very mixed evidence in this, and there was one group which told us that in the Gulf of Mexico, where this project had been initiated, that people had to drag the reefs off the seabed, take it on shore to clean it, then put it back again. And I think that what we have to hear, and what we say in our report and one of our recommendations, is the environmental interests in this have really got to decide amongst themselves which they believe is the best way forward, and we encourage that debate amongst our friends within the environmental sustainable groups. But I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for raising this. One thing, and just one last thing, because I do want other members to get it, is we were struck by the importance of carbon capture technology for the long-term future of the industry, with the Committee on Climate Change telling us that without this technology, decarbonisation of the sector would happen much slower and be more costly. And this is one area where government is ahead of the industry just now, with the government having announced £45 million of funding for carbon capture innovation, with more being potential available from industrial strategy funds, something I know particularly pleases my colleague from Banff-and-Buchan, given that most of that investment will be within his constituency, as rightly it should be, given the infrastructure that exists there. But we believe that the industry needs to step up its contribution in this area, and that the sector deal must contain detailed proposal from the industry on how it will support the development of carbon capture technology and how this progress can be measured. I'll conclude, Mr Walker, by saying that the oil and gas sector does have a bright future ahead of it. Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. And I'm very impressed by the report. My constituency, obviously, oil and gas has an enormous footprint in the Gordon constituency. But does he welcome that the UK continental shelf oil and gas industry operates in one of the best recognised to be one of the best fiscal regimes in the world? And does he welcome Her Majesty's Treasury's policies on fiscally with regard to oil and gas?
Yeah, obviously, and I think that goes without saying, that some of the fiscal support that's been given to the oil and gas sector has been welcome, and of course it's necessary. I think what we're doing is going to the next stage, which is the sector deal initiative, and I think that is, according to this report and what we found in the course of this inquiry, is now critical, and it's that type of investment is going to be required in order to try and make sure some of the things I've highlighted in this report take place. So we do believe that there is a bright future for the industry, and it's now up to the government to respond and how it decides to help the industry secure it. I hope that the government and industry rise to the challenge of this report and secure Scotland's future as a global leader in energy technology for decades to come. We do have 30 to 40 years. We have the opportunity to maximise economic recovery. We do have the ability now to make sure that we do transition to a new type of future for the North Sea. And I'm sure that with the right type of approach, the right type of mentoring and support, we can get there, and we will have a viable future for our oil and gas industry.
The Scottish Affairs